Justin, while he's our problem today, doesn't have much between his ears. His father, unfortunately, was smart and caused a lot of problems we're still dealing with right now. Okay, according to a lot of folks, my sound wasn't on for the first part, but it must be going by now. So welcome to the show, and good to see you all there. Be sure to use that comment scroll to send me questions, suggestions, and even let me know if the sound happens to pop off so we don't miss anything on there. So again, welcome, use it. Thanks for coming on, and let's get on with things. So I'm going to talk about, we got a big weekend coming up in Alberta, and it's the United Conservative Party annual general meeting. The registrations for that UCP AGM, all these acronyms, is just shy of 6,000 delegates. It's going to be the largest political convention in Canadian history. And for fans like me, we're fans of grassroots political participation. I mean, this is a fantastic development. Having that many engaged members taking the time and spending the money to take part in a convention, and this is between elections, indicates these members feel they can make an impact on the direction of the party. Now, the question remains whether the impact's going to be a positive one or not. Internal squabbles and division, those are hallmarks of conservative movements. I mean, when partisans aren't going to battle with opponents in other parties, they have this habit of turning their guns and firing at each other. Ralph Klein, Ed Stelmach, Alison Redford, and Jason Kenney, they all left the premiership due to a collapse of support, not around the province, but within their own parties. Only Rachel Notley and Jim Prentice left the roles due to electoral losses. The threat to conservative leaders from within their parties is quite real. But is Danielle Smith facing an ouster this weekend as she stands up in front of the members for a leadership review? I really doubt it. We've got factions making noise, trying to fan the flames of internal division within the party, and they're trying to create the impression that Smith faces a real threat of losing or at least getting a low level of support at the leadership review. None of these factions have the interests of the UCP or probably the province at heart. They don't think they're aiding the party by pushing Smith from the leadership. In fact, they're hoping the leadership is destabilized and the party will become weaker. Disgruntled and unemployed political leftists like Thomas Lukaszuk have been, you remember Fabio? Yeah, they've been trying to create issues through buying memberships in the party, and then he was playing victim when he found himself declined for his membership. Look, guys like him have no interest in supporting the party, and they never did. There's no benefit allowing these trolls to enter and work to disrupt things from within the organization. Parties are private entities, and they can limit membership to whoever they please. Yes, being grassroots focused, they should embrace as many members as reasonably possible, but to bring in somebody like Lukaszuk is just foolish. I mean, he's telegraphed quite clearly his only intentions to cause damage. If someone told you they plan to come into your house and purposely plug your toilet, would you still open the door and let them use your bathroom? The Lukacuks out there are vocal, but are few and far between. Well, folks, they're spreading rumors of organized groups of leftists flooding the convention floor to unseat Smith. There's little evidence of any real organization happening, and they won't have, if there are a few, they won't have a measurable impact on the review. Again, it's thousands of people. If anything, it's inspiring supporters of Smith to get out there, attend the meeting, and cast their ballot. Legacy media, of course, is working their hardest to give the impression that a rebellion's forming within the UCP. Some of that's inspired by the hard left tilt that most legacy outlets have embraced since becoming beholden to Trudeau's subsidies to pay their bills. Another reason for fostering division, of course, is simple. It's just they want to build excitement and draw readers and viewers. I mean, blowouts are boring in both sports and politics, and it's only the close races that make for excitement. The next group trying to stir things up are the conservative faction I've recently referred to as the chronic malcontents. They just exist to oppose, and nothing any leader can do will keep them happy for long. They join parties and purport to support them, and maybe they initially do. But then they draw lines in the sand and create policy hills for themselves to die upon. As soon as the party leader crosses one of these lines, and there's many of them, the mercurial malcontents shift into opposition mode and put all their efforts into deposing the leader. If you've been in conservative politics long enough, you'll notice it's actually usually the same names that keep showing up and try to tear things down. Look, grumpy conservative members can be organized and galvanized to take down leaders. We've seen it many times. The work by Take Back Alberta to remove Kenney from the party leadership was effective and striking. Take Back Alberta now, though, is little more than a shell of what it used to be, and the atmosphere of discontent just isn't in the air as it was a couple of years ago. New groups have been emerging with new policy demands and threats to unseat the leader if they don't get their way. These groups have every right to do so, and working to influence policies while at AGMs, well, that's how the democratic game works. The threat to Smith's leadership is hollow, though. With nearly 6,000 members dedicating hundreds of dollars crossing the province to take part in an AGM, it would take a very visible and well-organized machine to swing even a significant number of these people to vote against the leader in her second year in the role. The AGM is going to be an interesting event, but the battles to watch are going to be over the proposed policy amendments, not the leadership review. So I'm making my prediction now. Smith's going to garner over 85% from the members in support. I could eat crow on that, I guess. Politics are a crazy business, but I'm feeling pretty confident on this one. Either way, guys, I will see you at the AGM. It's going to be a fun one, and the Western Standard will have a hospitality booth. I got our news editor, Dave Naylor, in here. I'm sure you'll be partaking at the hospitality
No, sadly, I've got to stay here and mind the store.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I thought you were coming out.
No.
Oh, geez.
No, I've got to work from here.
Oh, you've been robbed. Well, I hope you're getting some hospitality booze while you're here.
Well, I hope you bring me some down.
I'll see what I can do. I won't be
You
drinking
stole
it.
my prediction, though. I was going to say 85 to 90%.
Okay, well, yours is on the higher side of 85, so we'll throw the prediction in at that.
Yeah. Yeah, just back from a nice weekend in Fort McMurray. How did that go?
Oh, God. Well, Fort Mac is Fort Mac. I mean, it's not a bad city. But
Well, how did you spend your time?
well, Jane has her barn quilt painting business, and then she was teaching a course up there, so I was there to assist. I was the official driver and helping Jane set up. She's busy as all get out. I'm enjoying my role as a kept man and driver.
Nice.
So as I sat in the hotel room, I just wrote my columns for the week and then waited for my wife to earn the money so I could have a good dinner.
So Fort Mac last weekend, Red Deer this weekend. Man, you're living the life.
I'm covering the province, I tell you.
Awesome. Speaking of covering the province, we have a rare Western Standard documentary up on leading the website right now. It's called Coal, Culture, and Conflict, and it's about the debate whether or not to allow coal mining again in the Crow's Nest Pass. It was done by documentarian extraordinaire Heidi McKillop, helped by our business expert Sean Polzer, and put together masterfully by Nico Abuto, our production guy. Last mining was done down there in 1983. And the towns are, they're trying to, they only survive right now on tourism. And the mine is arguing, look, we can bring jobs, we can bring economic benefits. And the opponents are saying environmental damage and concerns. So they've got a vote on that next month, and it's really interesting. I urge everybody to watch it. It's very well done. Other news leading the site this morning, a former Liberal MP by the name, and I've got to read her name, Selina Caesar Chevens. She was an Ontario MP for a term or two, and she writes about her, or she talks to Jordan Peterson about her interactions with Prime Minister Trudeau, and it's quite eye-opening, and he's a piece of work for sure.
Yeah, he is.
A couple of crime stories. We had a guy who randomly stabbed a customer in Tim Hortons 3 years ago. He got 3 years in the slammer. He was released after 2. And you're not going to believe this, Cory, but he's being rearrested again for committing crimes.
Wouldn't have seen that coming.
Wouldn't have seen that coming. Disturbing case in Saskatchewan where 4 teenagers have been arrested for assault. The youngest being 11. And obviously you can't charge an 11-year-old, so they're walking free. But you got these gang of kids, it's a figure they'd be home working on their Halloween costumes. We've got a Privy Council study out today showing that people think that other Canadians who take vacations are wealthy. They're in the upper class because they can't afford to go on vacation with all the economic pressures. So if you're going to Arizona for the winter, you are lifted to the wealthy of Canada, the elite.
Yeah, I'll be living in a fifth wheel, and it's a working trip. But aside from that, it's hey, that elitism tastes good.
At least it's warm. And still leading the site at the moment is crazy Stephen Guilbeault's attack on cats, and he's got cats in his target because they kill birds. So our own cat lady Linda Slobodian's got a great column dissecting Mr. Guilbeault. So it's fun. It's up there. I urge you to read it. And before I let you go, I'm going to put you on the spot. Quick U.S. election prediction.
I think Trump's going to squeak it through.
Yeah, I agree too. You stole my answer there.
Oh, well, we're just on the same page right now.
Same page. It's going to be a fun Tuesday night, and we're going to be here broadcasting. And it's going to be historic one way or the other.
Absolutely. And boy, at least, when our politics feel a little insane, at least we can look south of the border and think, it could be worse.
Could always be worse.
Right on. All right. Well, thanks, Dave. And sorry to discover here that you won't be at the AGM there, though I got a feeling you're not missing too much in some ways.
You know, raise a drink to me.
Well, my Diet Coke, it will be.
Your Diet Coke.
Yes. All right. Thanks, Dave.
All right.
So yes, and as you can hear, lots going on. A fantastic documentary, you know, and it's a nuanced issue down there in Blairmore, Coleman, that coal hub down there between, you know, people supporting coal mining, people opposing it. It's not this dusty open pit thing people might think it might be, but at the same time, people are concerned. There's a lot of ranchers down there, a lot of conservative supporters who have a problem with this. It's not just your usual crazed greenies. So check that documentary out, guys. It's good stuff. And yes, Linda Slobodian, boy, she loves to rip them up, and you don't want to get in her crosshairs. And Gilbo provides a ready target with going after cats. Man, there's nothing we're allowed to do anymore. So yes, this is what I like to remind you folks, though. The reason you can see those things, the reason we can produce them, the reason it's happening is because you've subscribed. We don't take any subsidies, no tax dollars here at the Western Standard, and we aren't asking for them, but we rely on you guys. $9.99 a month, $100 for a year. You've been coming through. That's why we've got reporters all over the place. That's why we're putting out these documentaries, and that's why we can do the show like we do today. So get on there, guys, westernstandard.news/subscription. Take out a subscription. And, you know, if you have already, again, thank you very much. We really do appreciate it. If you haven't, come on, get on there. Spread the word. Buy a subscription for a liberal friend for Christmas. Get them worked up. It's the gift that just keeps on giving. So yeah, lots going on. Like I said, with the AGM coming up this weekend, it's going to be busy. An interesting, statement from Jordan, the commenter, saying is Smith's greatest threat: internal party division or her own impulsive tendencies. Yeah. So, I mean, I've known Premier Smith for quite some time. I mean, we're not close compatriots, but I certainly dealt with her a lot over the years. And it's her impulsiveness I kind of find endearing. She's not the careful, methodical politician that you would expect out of a lot of people. But of course, it leads to a lot of danger too, because she speaks her mind, and she jumps right in on things, perhaps not necessarily being too well prepared. But I get tired of the politicians being hyper careful, spinning their wheels, afraid to make any big decisions and shake things up. As far as it being, as I said, though, in my opening monologue, I don't think there's much threat of internal party division at this time. It's only a year or two. It's the usual suspects making all the noise. I don't think there's a realistic threat against her role. Now, give it a year or two, that can certainly change. And as I said, the big threat for conservative leaders usually comes from within. Conservatives are a grumpy bunch. They really like tearing down their own quite often in a self-destructive manner. So we'll watch. And boy, what a year for elections, right? So yeah, we'll be doing live coverage on Tuesday night of the American election as it comes in. Hopefully it doesn't run us until the wee hours, as so many elections have these days. It's funny, with elections and vote counting and so on. And again, I've been over this online, and our great reporter out in BC, Jared Yeager, has put out a story on that, saying is we got results denialism coming up. It's a trend that's been happening of people. They don't like the results of an election, and they jump on every conspiracy they can think of as to why it was rigged. Look, I've worked on a lot of elections, from the ground volunteer to managing campaigns to running in them, and I've been in there as a volunteer scrutineering. Look, the process is very difficult to rig. It really is. It's pretty good. I worry about changes being made to it. I think they're making it more inefficient. They bring in these ridiculous counting machines that somehow make the counts take even longer than they did prior, when it was just simple paper ballots. And that's what fosters a lot of the mistrust. That's what fosters people to make theories as to why an election went one way or another. But no, even the campaign manager, for Rustad and BC, came out and said, no, that we lost. It was tight, it was close, but they lost. Likewise, in Saskatchewan, Scott Moe won, but it was close. These elections are really, really close. We'll talk a little more about that later. I'm not a big fan of Trump, I got to admit. If I was in the States, I'd probably vote Republican all the same, but I'm not big on him. And one of the reasons is that baloney over the last election being rigged. I'm sorry, he lost that one too. I know we'll get all the comments, people thinking otherwise, but I just don't feel that's the way things have been going. Okay, let's turn the page and get on to something more domestic. I've been looking forward to this. And his name is Andrew Spence. He's worked in the banking industry, and he's put out a book called Fleeced: Canadians versus Their Banks. And I did read it, and it was, it's a good read. It covers a lot up. It covers a lot up, doesn't cover it up, it exposes it. And banking is one of those things where you have no choice. You have to use banks. It's part of life. Thus, you should hope to get a reasonable rate or reasonable competition within the industry, and we're kind of lacking that in Canada. So thank you very much for joining me today to discuss your book, Mr. Spence. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Cory. It's a pleasure to be here with you today.
Thanks. So I guess I'll just kind of begin at the beginning, because people, even when you travel, you don't think going to another country to look into their banking systems or see differences. So it never really occurs to us to compare for other comparable markets, such as the UK or Australia or areas like that, their banking systems, which might be similar to ours, but looking that they're certainly not paying nearly as much to bank as we are they?
No, they're not. And there's a very good reason for that. And I don't want to get too wonkish from the very beginning here, but in those jurisdictions, here in Canada, we pride ourselves on good and close regulation of the banking system because safety matters, right? The mantra is stability isn't everything, but without stability, everything is nothing. Well, in the UK, they have tight regulation too, but the regulator also has a competition mandate, which means that they not only keep their banking system safe, but they also make sure they're fair. And in Canada, we don't have, until recently, a well-empowered competition bureau to ensure that we're getting good value for our money.
Yes, and so I mean, a lot of it, and you kind of cover it at the start, and you cover it more at the end of the book, though. The high horse Canada got on was in 2008 when the bank runs happened in the States. Things went badly, and that's where a lot of people said, "Well, we've got our hyper-regulated market. We didn't suffer through those things. Thus, it justifies having such strict controls on our banking system." So, I mean, there's some degree of rationale behind protecting, but if you overprotect, then your consumers are going to lose.
Yeah, there's no question. But I mean, I think there's a degree of misunderstanding here, right? We can have, and we should have, tightly regulated banks. Banks are unlike any other industry we have, right? But it's not just a choice between hyper safety and a casino and a free-for-all. With the advent of financial technology, we can now make our banking market what we call contestable, right? We can contest it. And that means that these fintechs or financial technology companies are able to come in if they were given access to the payment system in Canada, which they're not across the board, and not in the sense that really creates a degree of competition that would give the banks a run for their money. So if you go to Europe, for instance, everybody wanders around Europe with an app called Revolut. And then Revolut, you can figure out if you want to do a foreign exchange transaction, you just look at your phone and you see the best rate at the lowest possible cost. And it's the transaction's done instantaneously. We don't have that option in Canada, and we should have that option in Canada. And the banks know that this is coming, but they're dragging their feet. They're slowing the process down with the complicit shelter of the federal government, which means we don't see open banking in this country until 2026 at the earliest. And we don't even have an instantaneous real-time transactions payment system. And over 50 countries have this in place. And we don't even have a beta testing instantaneous payment system ready until 2026. It's shameful.
It is ridiculous. I'll throw an anecdote that just recently happened in our household. Actually, we've done some changes in our finances and things. We had a loan combined, and then the bank, one major bank was to pay off a loan with another major bank. But apparently, the only way they would accept it is with a bank draft. A physical bank draft had to be sent from one major bank to the next major bank. Yep. And of course, they sent it to the wrong branch, and now it's stuck in limbo. But why on earth, when I could tap to make a payment in seconds anywhere I go, can two major banks not do a transaction on my behalf without charging a fortune and getting it wrong?
Because they don't have to, because there's no competition, right? So necessity is the mother of invention. So if we had a degree of competition in the Canadian banking system, and I can assure you that the performance of the banks and the price at which we transact would improve very, very quickly. We've seen this in the past when in the mortgage market 20 odd years ago, 25 years ago, you'd go and apply for a mortgage at the bank. It would take you 2 weeks to know whether or not you were given the mortgage. And it was kind of a painful nail biting exercise for many, many aspiring homeowners. And there was a degree of competition at the time from non-bank providers of mortgages. And once that group began to get a decent critical mass, all of a sudden the banks could process your mortgage overnight. And so we know that if they're given the incentive to respond, they will. The key question we have to ask ourselves, I think, as citizens and as electors is, why is the federal government sheltering the banks to persist with these practices that keep competition at bay? And the answer is they can, because for some reason the federal government does not want to take it on. Now, we brought up the financial crisis, right? Sure, the banks didn't go under here, and we should all be extremely grateful for that, and regulation was a big part of that. But that doesn't mean to say that the banks should be free of competition because of it. What people don't understand is that the banks did receive substantial help in terms of liquidity provision from the Bank of Canada. The Federal Finance Department freed up a lot of liquidity in the system by buying mortgages from the bank's balance sheets. And if the financial crisis had happened another 12 months later, I think you would have found that some of the Canadian banks would have got themselves into some similar trouble. It's just that because more than or about half of their income comes from fees rather than from providing financial transactions, they didn't have to reach out into the risky stuff to retain high profitability targets because they didn't have to.
Yeah, so when the government's reticence in going into this, and it's funny because, I mean, they really dedicated a lot of time and energy going after the retail grocer oligopoly that we're dealing with and dragging the CEOs in front of committees and demanding that they explain their 4% profit margins, and demonizing these guys. And I don't think they should drag bank heads in and demonize them. But boy, if you really want to show an area where Canadians are kind of being taken to the cleaners, look at the margins on financial institutions right now, and it makes the grocers look like pikers in comparison.
I think this is a fair comment, Cory. If you look at the performance of the domestic commercial and personal lending and payments provision within the domestic market itself, the bank's return on equity until recently was in the high 30%, which is absolutely staggeringly high. And luckily for us, both TD Bank and Bank of Montreal have similar businesses in parts of the US banking market that are much more competitive. And what you find is that their return on equity in those markets is about half of what it is at home. So, you can see that they're extremely well protected. And whenever you bring this up with cabinet ministers and others in the federal bureaucracy, they say, oh, but the crisis, we did so well. Well, the banks are expensive, but we say they're safe. But we've had a couple of recent scandals where we can begin to question that narrative. Are they as safe as they say they are? And are they as safe as we have been led to believe? I'm not entirely convinced.
So another area, I mean, the banks have really spread out into all sorts of side industries, I guess you could say. And you sort of speak a bit to that, like areas where if we were going to sort of break up some of the areas that banks get into and allow some more competition, financial advising, investment products, things like that, where the banks really try to suck, customers into further, I guess, being entrenched into their financial lives. Those are areas that other businesses could set up and provide those services without putting your banking structure at risk.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I'm often asked, okay, so fintechs would be good. Let's get on and get that done. And, we sit and whistle in the wind and wait for that to happen. I think one of the things that we could do with the stroke of the ministerial pen, if we were so inclined, or our political leaders were so inclined, is to demand transparency from the banking system, right? I mean, if I have a stock trading account at a discount brokerage at the arms of one of the banks, they will probably charge me about $10 to do a transaction, right? Buy a stock, sell a stock, buy a mutual fund, sell a mutual fund, buy an ETF, sell an ETF. I'd like to know what the cost to them is of facilitating that transaction. I'm willing to bet you, Cory, and your listeners and your viewers, that it's a couple of cents. So why am I being charged $9.99 or $10 for it? It's the same with credit cards, right? I mean, the interest rate on credit cards has barely budged over almost 40 years, and yet inflation is significantly lower. The funding rates, the deposit rates that fund those things are very much lower. We're told that there's a lot of fraud in credit cards and that there is, potentially high losses because borrowers are more marginal, and yet when banks securitize those credit card receivables into trusts, S&P have to rate them, and they say, well, a third of all the borrowers are super prime, so you don't lose money on them. The charge-off rates are 3%, and fraud may well be high. But again, we don't know because we can't see it, right? So I think there is a general sense amongst the population that it's expensive, they're dissatisfied, the lack of choice, the frictions that are put in the way to just do simple payments, 5-day holds on checks. I mean, seriously, in a world of where countries like Brazil have instantaneous payment systems available for people, why don't we have it here? Let's see. And then we can see whether or not you're justified in charging what you do for access to the banking system. My guess is we'd be pretty shocked.
Well, that's it. They haven't adjusted their rates for the realities of today. I mean, if it was the days of 40 years ago, and if you were going to transfer funds from one account to another, you'd have to have conversations between real people. Paper documents would have to be brought up and amended and changed, and it's going to be cost. Time it takes up time and cost. But I mean, we're talking a digital transaction, as you said, pennies, if that, and still, though, the rates stay the same. Same with credit cards. You point out in the book, I mean, we suffered through double-digit interest rates in the 80s and into the early 90s for even mortgages. Those have come down, but the credit card rates haven't changed a bit. Yeah. And people carrying high credit card balances on unsecured debt, that's a lot of actually what's pushing a lot of people to some financial distress more than mortgages or other borrowing tools.
Yeah, there's no question. And I want to come back to the point I made right at the beginning, Cory, if you don't mind, which is
sure.
OSFI does a good job of regulation, right? Ensuring safety. No question about that. And I think they're an important agency and they need to be free to do their job. But they don't pay any attention to competition issues, right? So in the United Kingdom, for instance, the Financial Conduct Authority actually has responsibility for competition as well. And so there are many charges that people who are financially marginal, usually the poor, who find themselves in difficulty, will find themselves overdrawing their accounts, where they will be charged a simple fee for every time they are overdrawn, will be charged interest on the money that they've essentially borrowed from the bank that tolerates that. They'll be charged $50 for an NSF check, non-sufficient funds, to bounce a check. This is allowed to go on. So in the UK, the Financial Conduct Authority looked at these various charges and said, sorry, you can do. You're not allowed to do that. Moreover, you have a duty of care. If you can program your system to assign a charge and a fee every time someone's overdrawn, you can identify, given the profile of the customer, whether or not that person is marginal or not, or maybe in some difficulty. And now UK banks have a duty of care. They have to find out what's going on in that person's life to ensure that the banks don't essentially levy a poor tax. And meanwhile, there's no agency here in Canada that's charged with that responsibility. So we have some gaps in our regulatory structure. If we're not going to allow competition, regardless of where you are on the political divide, all of us need a degree of protection if we cannot look to competition to protect us. And the reason we like competition is because it prevents the most egregious of these charges emerging, and it also forces incumbents to become more efficient. And so, to my mind, we've known this in economics well over 100 years. Why aren't we doing something about it?
Yeah, well, and in Canada, the government pressured actually, and they didn't impose, but they really twist the arms hard and brought about a grocer's code of conduct that they have to abide by now for depending on how they deal with suppliers and pricing and things like that. I guess before I let you go, the main thing is getting the political will, because there doesn't seem to be interest or will on the parts of our government. But right now, we're going into an election year. Now is a good time to get the pressure on the folks running for election, saying, hey, can you speak up on this? And of course, the best way to do that is to get the public informed, because they don't realize how they are being fleeced, as your book puts it. So, I mean, before I let you go, where can people find a copy of this to find out for themselves and see how well you've broken down, how badly we're kind of getting it in the Canadian system and how we could work towards solving this?
You can get it on Amazon. You can get it directly from the publisher, Sutherland House Books. My wife encouraged me to record it, so you can lull yourself to sleep with my voice if you so desire. I think at the end of the day, Cory, with this book, we've deliberately written it for a general readership, and we want people to have the ideas, have the knowledge, and have the language to understand their predicament and to ask for more and to demand better. Democracy is not about showing up every 4 years to cast a vote. It's about engaging with your MPs, engaging with your representatives every day. Because if we don't, then we get what we deserve.
Well, absolutely. And if we can arm ourselves with information, it makes it harder for them to baffle us with BS when we try to ask them why things are the way they are. So I really appreciate you writing this and coming on today to talk about it. And I hope we can talk again down the road after the banking system's been fixed up for us.
Well, we will see. Thank you very much, Cory. It's been a pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you. So that is author, and he's worked in the banking industry as well. Andrew Spence, he wrote Fleeced, Canadians versus Their Banks. And yes, as you say, if you Google it, you can find it. It's a good read. As he said, he wrote it for people. It's not, it's a bit wonky, but not too terribly. I mean, we can understand all of these things. Anybody who does a household budget, you see all of these things, whether it's your mortgage, your credit card bills, your investment tools, if you're, saving for retirement and things like that. It's not terribly complicated. And what I really appreciate, though, especially because it's early in the book too, is the comparisons. We don't just compare to the American system where there are dozens and dozens and dozens of competitors. Let's look then at others like the UK, like Australia. And as he said, we don't have to embrace that system or throw things open, as he used the casino comparison, but we could better regulate and add transparency. Transparency in so many levels with so many things makes things better for us. If we don't know what's going on, how can we solve them? And again, that's just where I was stumped. As I said, because I've just been watching while the country's been beating on grocers for quite some time. And fine, and they say it's because it's a need. You can't avoid buying groceries. Well, that's true, but you can't avoid banking either. So you're kind of stuck in that same sort of thing. So check it out, guys. I like these things, even if they seem a little dry, they're important and we're all into them. All right, let's look at some of the comments here and things such as that. We're talking again about election fixing and so on. A couple of people saying no one would ever cheat on an election, or can't trust human nature not to cheat on an election. No, people have tried to cheat on elections. They have, and that's why there are so many checks and balances right now for the elections. And we still have to always be on guard. Absolutely, we have to be vigilant. And we got to make sure that these things aren't being rigged. We got to make sure that there's not funny business, because there are people willing to, but just because people are willing to do it doesn't mean they've been getting away with it. I mean, it's not that easy. It really isn't. If you've worked as a scrutineer, I'm just going to put you through the process of what you can do. I figured that out on the X as well. As boring as it might be, anybody can go in. You can swear in at a polling station. You can be there from before the polling station opens. It's like a magician with their tricks. They will open the boxes, show you that they're empty. They're not pre-stacked with ballots. Those boxes then get taped up. They get sealed. You can watch them being sealed. You can stay all day and watch every ballot going into those boxes. Then you can stay in the evening and watch the envelopes being ripped open. As far as scrutineering, you can be at every part of it, and plus into the boxes and watching the count. It's very, very hard. Now, the tabulating machines, those aren't networked. I know people start going on with Dominion and the rest of that. Okay, that's fine, but we weren't using that here. And they're just for counting the votes. They aren't networked. And again, the scrutineers are there and watching it all the time. I don't like them. I don't think we need them. There's chances for them breaking down, and they also add to the mistrust. But just because they're there doesn't mean somebody's rigging it. The reason I get worried is that the bureaucrats keep changing it. I fall back to the old statement about it. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. The system works. We can count the votes. We can get the results into the evening. Sometimes, because people are saying, oh, wow, it took so long in BC to get those. And it did. It took too long. Absolutely. But by the same token, it's always been the case. If there were any elections where the results were under 100 and there had to be recounts, it's going to take a few days before they recount that. But again, scrutineers are allowed to be there for the recounts. As for mail-in ballots and special ballots, yeah, there's room for some funny business, but the margin and volume of it and difficulty is very small. I worked in the oil field. I used to, if I knew I was going, because I've always been a political weenie, I knew if I was going to be out of town on a voting day, I would go into the returning office and get a ballot and do a special ballot. I could also apply for and get a mail-in ballot when I was out in the field. But there's checks and controls on all of that too. And for you to be able to get through that whole process to bring in enough to actually swing an election again, very, very difficult. Very difficult. You're going to have a better chance, for example, in BC, where again, Nobody who worked within the election, even on the conservative side, is saying it was rigged. It's people outside of it who are making those claims. They're going to be better served working on how can we win the next one rather than chasing unfounded allegations. Hey, if there's proof or evidence, then bring it forward. But as it is, it's just a lot of speculation. We got to watch our elections carefully. Absolutely. They are integral, and trust in the election is essential. If people don't trust the process, that's where things fall apart and they get into trouble. And that's where people feel helpless. That's one of the bigger areas, again, you see, as I said, where I'm sour on Trump. And again, I suspect he's probably going to narrowly win it. I think he'd be better than Harris. If I was an American, I would probably vote for Trump. I was in the Standard newsroom that we were here, a bunch of us watching, fascinated when it all broke on January 6th, when that whole mess happened. And the reason these guys felt that they should storm the Capitol was because they were convinced the election had been fixed. And then when Trump finally spoke, he got up and said, people should calm down. They should stop this. Okay, fine, good. Thank you. It's about time you spoke to them and just told them that. But then he goes back into, I know the election was stolen. So then he just went and poured gasoline on the bloody fire. Irresponsible, ridiculous, and stupid. So I worry about that when a person who's going to be leading the most powerful country on the planet has those tendencies. Again, I see him as a lesser evil of the two, but I really thought the Republicans could pick somebody better. But we'll see what happens as things move ahead. The bottom line is electoral systems need to be trusted, absolutely. Will people try to fix them if they can get away with it? Yes, they will, but they aren't that easy to fix. They really aren't, especially if you participated in them, you see. The reason these checks and balances are in is because all these things have been tried before. That's why they show the box at the start, because somewhere 80 years ago in some country, some person duct taped or whatever a bunch of ballots inside a box so that when they opened it, they would all fall in with the rest of the votes or things like that. So there are a lot of processes and checks, and there's no better check than having every candidate have the ability to have people in there watching the process from start to end, and that is what we have. So again, it's not perfect, but there are ways. There really are. Let's see what else we got going on. See, here's another one. Old Wolf. If you don't believe there may be cheating in the U.S. elections, then you don't understand human nature. No, my point is people will try. I didn't say they won't. But there hasn't been any good evidence that they gotten away with it. There really isn't. So, I mean, you need better. You need better. So let's see. Oh, here we go. Another commenter saying, hi, Cory, a new article by Reuters just came out. Leader of the NDP says he won't help bring down Justin Trudeau. Please express your shock. I'm going to guess that Ward, the commenter, follows me on X, because I've been poking at for a long time and pointing out to people, even though the Bloc is rattling their sabers and they're saying we're going to bring it down. Look, as long as Jagmeet the Weak is leading the NDP, Trudeau is not going anywhere. The NDP is broke. They're going to get slaughtered in the next election. They have something like 300,000 in the bank. And he's not going to go to the polls. There's just no way. So he'll talk big, but he'll cave every time. The term I keep using when I'm teasing him online, which I do often, is I call him Justin's little parliamentary chihuahua. He's like a little chihuahua. He's yap, 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 yap. But he's got no teeth. He's got no power. He's a coward. He's quivering with rage and quivering with fear. He's a wimp. He's got no principles. If he had principles, he'd be pushing for what he is. You see, I have more respect. Doesn't mean I like, but I have more respect for honest socialists rather than opportunists. That's where I see, for example, I have more respect for, in Alberta, Rachel Notley, who led the NDP, because she's always been true to her ideology, as broken and flawed as her ideology is. Her replacement, Naheed Nenshi, he's a political chameleon who will do whatever he has to do and say whatever he thinks he has to say to try and win power. I mean, he campaigned as a conservative when he took the mayoral race in Calgary. He pretended to be conservative. He had groups of people pretending he was conservative. He was anything but. He was Spencey. He bloated the government. He brought everything inside. He ended transparency. Look at him now. This is a man who pretended to be conservative, who is now leading a literal socialist party. I don't trust him. He's deceptive. He will go whatever way the wind blows. So Jagmeet Singh, similar. He's not going to die on a hill of principle. He'll instead drag out this mess at the expense of the country because his stinking leadership, which has been terrible, has led his party into such dire straits that he's as afraid of going to an election as Trudeau. So folks thinking and hoping that the Trudeau government is going to be pulled down by a confidence vote in the near future, it's not going to happen. Some people saying the 24 Liberals who anonymously penned the letter asking Justin to step aside, please, 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 Justin, will you step aside? They could come out and vote on a confidence vote and bring it down. Yes, they could, but they would be cutting their own political throats. Look, the Liberal MPs who are concerned, and they're legitimately concerned, they don't want to rush to an election either. They just want Trudeau out. They're hoping if Trudeau's out with another year to work on it, they might be able to salvage their seats. They know if they went to an election tomorrow, they're going to lose their seats. So they're not, again, we're getting into self-serving rather than serving the country, but that's the reality of it. They're not going to vote to pull Trudeau out either. The only hope is that Trudeau gets tired of being attacked on all sides from within his party, outside his party. One of the bigger turning points we saw recently was, with Christy Clark and Mark Carney both coming out in the open, sniffing around, saying, yeah, you know what, I'm gunning for Justin's job. I mean, one of the things people always said to try and defend, well, who's going to replace him if he leaves? Well, here's two people raising their hands saying they will. God, I don't want to see either of them as prime minister, but it takes that question away. Like, and the MPs are, like I said, the sharks are starting to circle under his feet. He's in serious, serious trouble. It was funny seeing some of the things put out. When somebody put out a picture of his bawling. Remember when Justin used to, every week he was crying about something? He was crying this apology, crying at that apology, crying at this, crying because the toilet was plugged, whatever it might be. He was always crying. Apparently he'd put the tears on during his caucus meeting last week too. Shows a couple of things. I think he's a drama teacher and his tears are as fake as Anna Nicole Simpson's chest was, but it shows he does feel the pressure. He knows he's desperate. He knows he's got to try and do something to save his skin. He's stubborn. He's foolish. People say, and I was wrong. He proved me wrong. A year ago, I figured he'd be gone. He proved me wrong. I don't know what it's going to take. Some people are saying he's too vain to leave right now. I see what you're saying, but with that vanity, I mean, you've got an out, right? You can do the old political, I've done the walk in the snow like my dad. And I've decided that I need to spend more time with my family. It's important to me right now. Our family has had challenges. We're going through a divorce. The pressures of politics have been hard on my kids. I need to leave office so that I can focus on that, because what I've been doing right now has been unfair to Canadians and unfair to my children because I've been splitting my time between the two. So thank you for giving me these 10 wonderful years in power, and I'll step aside for someone else. See, it can be done. I could be Trudeau's speechwriter, though I would put a bunch of ums and ahs in so he feels comfortable about it. No, he can get out right now and maintain at least a little bit of pride, but to hang and cling all the way to the bitter end so that when you do leave, it's with a boot on your butt. Whether it's from the electorate or from your caucus 7 months from now or whatever, just getting so desperate that they practically, do a Roman Senate thing on you. As somebody, Old Wolf says, he has mental stability issues. Yeah, I don't know. I think he is delusional. I mean, the only thing I can try and guess is he thinks he can turn it around. He really thinks that given another 10 months, 11 months to work on this, that he could potentially win back public support. And here's something on X. I had some conversations with people on there earlier too. They're saying, oh, well, he's going, in October 2025, no matter what, if we could just make it to then. Well, if you read the Constitution, actually, he can go till 2026. So, and people saying, yeah, but look at the Elections Act. It says it's October 2025. Yeah, that's an act. That's legislation. They can change that in a heartbeat. Alberta, it used to be illegal to run a deficit. That was the day I was sitting in the legislature and I watched. We had the Balanced Budget Act. And I'm pretty sure it was the Stelmach government. I was sitting in the gallery there at the legislature. They came in, they tabled a bill or a motion to repeal their Balanced Budget Act. Bang, everybody voted. It was repealed. It was gone. And then they tabled a deficit budget. That's how easy it is. And if you've got a majority government sitting there, or if you've got Jagmeet Singh and Justin Trudeau, you can say, we're going to change the Elections Act and make the date 2026. There's nothing stopping them from doing that. The Constitution is the only hard line, and that gives them 5 potential years. Do I think that's going to happen? No, probably not. I really don't. I mean, as others are saying, he's on the brink of going down as it is right now. I can't see him surviving 2 more years in there. I can't see us surviving 2 more years of him in there. But who knows? Politics are bloody crazy. We're in for a crazy time, a crazy month, a crazy year. By the next time I'm on this show, the American election will have finished, so we'll be able to break that down and see what we're looking forward to. The AGM will have been done from the Wildrose UCP in Red Deer. I'll be able to report on that. We're going to have the pipeline on this evening. Tune in for that, guys. We're going to break down a bit more of these things. We're going to be broadcasting from the AGM floor, by the way. So keep an eye on all those Western Standard channels. We're going to be interviewing some interesting people, covering stuff as it happens down there. This is your source. This is right on the ground. This is unfiltered. Global's going broke. No sense watching their stuff anyways. But if you really want to watch the dark story, watch their stock levels right now, guys. It's pretty scary out there. So either way, I've bent your ear long enough. Thank you very much for tuning in today, guys. I do appreciate it, even if we don't always all agree. That's all part of the fun. Be sure to tune in again to our other shows and to this one next week at this time. We'll have a whole bunch of new issues, a new guest, and we'll solve the world's problems. Thanks again. See you then.